Let's go back in time to 1932 as Converse brings you historic footage of the legendary original Celtics with whom all great professional teams are compared.
We have now taken over your radio.
Richie Guerin is about to show you the most important step in getting past a man. It's the first one.
And Oscar will inbound it. The men in green, the Milwaukee Bucks, that's Alcindor against Bellamy.
Has Jordan. Allen shakes. Gray gets two.
Gilmore on snap. Oh, brother. Lead Toledo artists. You get 21.
4:28 to go in the first quarter for the Cow Palace. Here's Barry.
Jordan. Open. Chicago with the lead.
Hello, and welcome back to the Over and Back Classic NBA podcast. I'm Jason Mann. With me, as always, is Rich Kraetsch. Rich, good to be back with you.
Absolutely.
And we are going to next talk about the top 50 case for Dennis Rodman. Definitely an interesting figure in NBA history. Very colorful, I guess you could say.
Literally.
You being a Chicago Bulls fan obviously has some meaning to you as well. He is just kind of looking at the overall case for him, or some of the numbers for him. He's 104th all time, or excuse me, He's 104th all time in win shares, 98th in win shares for 48, 61st in box score plus minus, and 61st in value over replacement player. He is twice on the All NBA third team. He was 7 times on the All Defensive first team and once on the All Defensive second team. He has 1 season in the top 10 in win shares, 1 season in top 10 in value over replacement player. He is first all time in rebounding percentage by quite a margin. He was first in the league for 8 straight seasons, and also is, for whatever it's worth, he is 9 times in the top 10 in defensive rating. I don't think individual defensive rating tells you a whole lot, but it's there. So, in the Bill Simmons Book of Basketball Pyramid, he is 69th. And in the Slam Magazine Top 500, he is 48th. So it's a very strong case that he is the strongest rebounder ever, an incredible defensive force, and a major contributor to some of the winningest teams ever with 5 rings. But, can a player with so little scoring be considered for the top 50 whose value goes completely on defense? I think that's kind of really the case that the answer that we have to come up with if we're going to kind of consider Rodman and maybe some other guys too as a top 50 candidate. So, Rich, what do you think?
Yeah, he's an interesting one, and I think the biggest part, and you mentioned it in his strengths, you talk about possibly the greatest rebounder ever, and a guy that you can easily make a case that he is, the best rebounder of all time. Can you leave a guy out of the top 50 if he's the best at one of the major parts of the game? You know what I mean? That's something that throughout this process and looking through Rodman and looking at stuff, it's like, man, and because what you mentioned is correct. I mean, it's hard when the guy has pretty much no value on one side of the ball, but he is so good on the other side of the ball in terms of defense and rebounding. And we look at some of the keys of the game and the facets of the game or whatever. 2 of them he's like elite all time great in, and it's just because he's not so good in the other. It's I don't know, because I feel like on the other side, if there was a guy who was an all time great scorer but not sort of a middling defensive player, we sort of. We wrestle with this idea too, but a lot of times we kind of, in the end, we'll say, yeah, they're probably in or whatever, as long as they add something else. Well, this guy's, the greatest rebounder ever, arguably, and one of the best defensive players ever. So to me, I would almost have to say he's an absolute yes. But, there is some merit to what you said of, like, it does kind of open the floodgates for some other guys that might now become, no doubters, because it's like, well, if Rodman's in there, and I don't usually like doing that of like, well, if X is in, then, Y and Z have to be in or whatever. But, if you make a case that Rodman's a no doubter, then, there are some other guys that have some good cases as well.
Yeah. And, Rodman has, 7.3 points per game for his career, which is obviously it's very low. That would be by far the lowest of anybody who would be on our list, I think, by half. I think unsettled is like 14. So, I see what you're saying for sure. And I think that there's also a case that, maybe the numbers aren't telling us, the advanced stats aren't quite that strong for Rodman, that they don't necessarily capture the things that he does the best. But there's a really interesting study done by Benjamin Watson at skepticalsports.com. He writes for 538 now, and he wrote, like a really interesting series on, making a case for Dennis Rodman to be in the Hall of Fame. This was before that he was elected to the Hall of Fame. And, the things that stood out to me on that piece were, one, that he was incredibly great both at rebounding on both ends of the floor, which is not something that is a case for basically any other rebounder. There was no trade-off for him in offensive and defensive rebounding rates. He was elite at both. Even though we've talked about how he didn't really bring that much on offense, his teams actually played significantly better on offense with him in the lineup, even after accounting for the offensive rebounding. So obviously the offensive rebounding is something that would add value on offense, but he was able, when he was on the floor, the offenses were better. I think Ben Wallace is another guy who that has happened to, where Ben Wallace is, definitely, I think in some ways a similar case to Rodman, where the value seems to be all in defensive on the defensive end, but he's also had kind of a similar thing, and Rodman has, in that piece, some of the greatest, like scoring margin, like as far as terms on being on the floor versus being off the floor, the on-off stuff. Like Rodman has, like one of the, if not the best numerical case of like players in the past 25, 30 years.
Yeah, which is insane because if you think about that again, after accounting for the odds of rebounding, you look at a guy who, by all accounts, there's no reason to pass him the ball. The offense, is not gonna, you could almost make a case that what, leave Dennis. If Jordan's coming down the lane or whatever, just leave Dennis. You know what I mean? Like just completely forget about Rodman or whatever. And then you see that where it'd be interesting to see Rodman in this sort of era where you'd have more kind of a zone defense, ability to sort of play areas versus having to play players. Obviously. In his time, he was able to sort of, the guy had to kind of stick with him. You couldn't have a floater, like we see LeBron James do a lot of times where the guy he just kind of leaves his guy and just sort of floats in the space or whatever. It'd be interesting to see how he would sort of adjust to this era, but we look at a guy like Ben Wallace who played a decent amount of his career in that era, and it's still, as you said, he was still a great effect on his offense, even without being, an offensive player. But yeah, I think I look at that. And I think, again, that's another notch in his resume. That's just an incredible all-around resume. Real quick here, I'm going to look at era position and all-time at his position, a few of the advanced stats. 10th in win shares in his position and his era, 16th in win shares per 48, and 6th in value over replacement players. So he definitely stands out amongst forwards of his era and position. All time, he drops down a little bit here. 46th in win shares, 60th in win shares per 48, but then does pretty well in value over replacement, or 26th in value over replacement player. And a lot of that is, of course, defensive blocks plus minus and the defensive stats as well. Add a little bit more to that. But yeah, he's an interesting case. To me, I think he has to be in the conversation at some point because, as I said, it's just, I don't know if I can do this list without, having arguably the best rebounder ever. I mean, he's the best at one of the major facets of the game, and he's so far and away, as you said, the one of the best or the best or whatever. And then you add in the elite defense. It's a good case for me. I don't know if he's a slam dunk. I'm not saying he's absolutely in there, but I think he merits, at least a thought when we get that final pairing and the final 50.
Yeah, and his defensive versatility obviously was, he could defend bigs and he could defend wings. Yeah. Each extremely well. Obviously, he keyed. I mean, the Bulls, improved incredibly when he came over there. I mean, obviously, Jordan was at full form again as well. I mean, it wasn't just Rodman being in there, but that was a big. He was a very important player for those teams. Obviously, they would not have won 3 championships without him. No question about it. And in the Pistons, he was strong there. I mean, he replaced a Hall of Famer and Adrian Dantley. They basically traded Adrian Dantley because, hey, Dennis Rodman needs to play. So it's so I mean, he was a key player for a lot of great teams. Yeah, I think there's a good argument for him, and it's not necessarily he's not necessarily a slam dunk, but I think but I definitely do think that there's a strong case. I'm a little surprised he didn't get on the initial list. And granted, it was done. So it would have been before the 7. It would have been during the 72 Or I guess it would have been done because it was 97 All-Star games, so they would have already had the 72-10 season.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah.
So part of it may have just been because of Rodman's off the court stuff of just the wildness and just
they just don't want him there.
Feeling like he wouldn't represent
he'd be he'd have pink hair or whatever,
right,
and
wearing a dress.
Rick Barry would be
or whatever,
throwing comments about it.
Yeah,
and stuff,
there you go.
So, do you think him and Rick Barry have ever been in the same room?
And
how would that go? I think well.
Yeah, I mean,
I feel like they'd get along really well.
Rick probably just tried to show him how to shoot free throws.
Exactly. So. I love. There's one year, looking at Dennis Rodman's career, I love it that there was a Pistons year where he just shot a lot of three pointers and just not a lot, but he shot like 101. I think. Oh, at 91-92. Yeah, I'm finding it now. He was 32 of 101. From there, 31% is not bad.
Yeah.
I mean, when you consider that, if you remember like prime, Chicago Bulls, Dennis Rodman, like that dude looked like he had never like practiced a shot in his life or whatever. To hit 31% from three, that's not bad. It's 30 years old too, Dennis Rodman. But yeah, he never really did it again. And I think the rest of his career, I don't know if he amassed 100 total.
Yeah, and he was such an oddball in just so many different ways. As far as he was 25 when he came in the league. He came from a very small college. I mean, just everything about his career path was strange. Just
I still don't get how he like actually made it to the NBA. You know what I mean? Like it's really unique that this guy was able, as you said, from Southeast Oklahoma State. Like what the hell is that?
Right.
Like it's not even it's just a non-factor. And he's a guy who comes in the NBA and when he initially is there in Detroit or whatever, he's a guy that he just can't. I feel like when you get a guy that there is merit, of course, to rebounding and defense or whatever, but I feel like a lot of people would look at this guy and go, Jesus, he can't score at all. Like he's just he's so awkward. He's weird. Where this guy come from? It's just the story of him getting to the NBA still just amazes me. Like it's like a one of a kind thing that this guy 6'7" too. I think that's another important part of his size as well. Like he's the greatest rebounder of all time, and it's like he's like the size of LeBron. Like he's the size of like Sean Livingston and point guards these days, and he's the best ever. It's so weird. He's got just the most unique career ever, and I don't know if we're ever going to be able to do it justice. In this project, he'd be a guy that I'd love to do just like a real big long introspective about because it's just so much there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I'm just trying to think of like a player who is like him, the player who is closest to being like Dennis Rodman, and I can't think of anybody who
like in today's game.
Well, yeah, or any time really. I mean, just anybody who kind of has that combination of skills, and I don't think there's anybody who just is his size with his skill set who can rebound like he did. I mean, I really don't think there's anybody.
Yeah, like you said, I think Ben Wallace is the next closest comp.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, Ben Wallace didn't really defend wings, and
right, exactly, yeah. and that's the difference. There is like Ben Wallace had his fun stuff, but yeah, he's guarding point. He's guarding power forwards.
Yeah, he guarded bigger guys.
But you can't switch on Rodman. Like Rodman, it's like okay, cool, yeah, I got you locked down now, Gary Payton. Like you know what I mean?
Right.
Like that's insane. Like oh wait, crap, I'm back on. Now I'm on Ewing. Oh now I'm on Mark Jackson. It's like that's insane. Like how does that happen? Like you can't do that.
Yeah, it's
like he's got the LeBron defensive thing. But like but just take out any and all scoring. It's very weird. Yeah, like you said, it's unheard of, really.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, everyone, thanks for checking us out. You can find us at hardwoodparoxysm.com. We are part of the HP network of podcasts. You can find both our podcasts or all of the HP network podcasts on iTunes. We'd appreciate a rating and review. And you can find us also at overandbacknba.com, which is our forums where you can discuss any of the top 50 players or anything to your heart's content regarding basketball history. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at overandbacknba. And we also have a new newsletter, NBA Over and Back NBA History newsletter, which recounts the what's been happening in the world of NBA history for the week. We just try to find interesting articles, podcasts, or videos, anything that relates to classic basketball we have in there. So check that out. And until next time, thanks for listening, and we'll be back in soon.